Nowadays in GoTWiC, synergy is such an imperative part of PvP setups, and you have your female, weakness, and bleed synergy types, and typically the three of them don't interchange whatsoever, and you can't hybrid them together. They tend to have mechanics which counteract mechanics of the other synergy types. So for example, Sonara will directly block both the effects of weakness and female. So here she'll silence all allied commanders. It can somewhat read as just silencing herself, but it affects all 5 commanders. And she'll also do the same with weakness, where she prevents weakness attacks from being initiated whatsoever. So historically, hybriding in bleed with other synergy types hasn't been possible whatsoever. The only synergies you can somewhat hybrid is female and weakness, because they don't block each other in any way. The only issue with that is typically the weakness commanders are male, and they of course therefore don't get the benefits of Layla or Salma because they aren't female to benefit from their active ability buffs. For mid-spenders, I do still like the female weakness hybrid, and this is going to be very much a video focused on higher pay brackets. So if you're interested in just where you can go with your own account and you're a mid-spender, I wouldn't overly worry about this video, but it can potentially be an interesting topic and perhaps something we're gonna begin to see a bit more in the future. So what I'm alluding to here is while Sonara blocks the other synergy types, Rhea does not. All Rhea will do is silence herself, and Rhea is actually the bleed enabler of the bleed synergy. All Sonara interacts with is normal attacks, actually. So the bleed component of bleed, ironically, can actually be hybrided in with female specifically, because you still need to proc the bleeds off crits through Rhea, and those will have to come from normal attacks, and of course if you're weakness attacking, they therefore won't proc. But now with the release of Rhea's weapon, if we look at that, look at the 4-star version of it, you'll note down here this is at 1-star. It still says down here silence status, unable to cast active army skills. If we go to 4 stars on this, that silence effect is actually gone, and I know someone who has asked a VIP about this, and whether their answer is to be trusted or not, what I can tell you is the VIP did say this was intentional with the removal of the silencing effect. So now you will have Rhea at 4 stars with her 4-star weapon equipped will now have no counter synergy with female whatsoever, which means you can run her with female builds, and female synergies will of course be normal attacking from the 1st second to the 40th second of fights, so you can actually get a lot of additional damage through the crits and therefore through the bleeds, and still gain the benefits of her using her active abilities because she's not silenced, and being female, so she'll benefit from Salma and Layla as well. So if you're running, say, a sort of mid-spender Cav female build, Rhea at 4-star with 4-star weapon now will be a good addition there. You just won't be able to roll Cav base attack in that situation. But more specifically, what I'm going to be focusing on in this video is the idea of bleed infantry players who already have bleed set up in their accounts, being able to adjust to this setup if it tests well in practice, and potentially if it will benefit them in certain synergy counter scenarios. The other component of this is that Rhea is the bleed enabler, and she actually causes a lot of bleeds herself with her weapon at 4 stars because of how it cuts the normal attacks required down to just 10. But Jon is the main engine behind bleeds typically because he'll cause so many crits through his 20% chance for crits for the first 25 seconds of the fight. And you can potentially run with just Rhea alone, or with Rhea and Jon now, a female bleed hybrid. And this is something that wasn't possible really until the release of Rhea's weapon, and I believe it either isn't possible to have her weapon at 4-star yet, or it was only possible like yesterday at the time of recording. So no one has been able to test this yet, and it's all theoretical. But when you do actually look at the theoretical maths of this, you'll see that the numbers are very, very strong when comparing it over to the female equivalent. So these references to mono-inf normals, this is just a channel I have where I tracked all the amount of normal attacks for a synergyless mono-inf into mono-inf rebel group, just to math out things like this, basically. So at the 25 seconds mark, there was 85 normal attacks, and at the 40-second mark, across the whole fight, there was 140 normal attacks. So if we do the maths on those 85 normal attacks in the time that Jon's 4-star is active, there's 85 normal attacks, 20% chance, that will be 17 on average Jon crits. Jon, on average, will crit at 150% damage, so it's 50% higher normal attack scaling than it would be with a normal female commander. And the way bleeds work is it will deal the crit damage via Rhea spread out across 5 seconds, but because the crit multiplier is 150% by default, this can go higher as well with Longclaw starred, but I'm just going to use 150% as the baseline here. But keep that in mind as I go down, this is the worst case scenario, and if you're really whale, this will go even higher. But even without Sonara and her extra normal attacks, you'll gain 3,400% additional damage coefficient through Jon with Rhea present, and he'll still use his commander active 4 times, so he won't benefit from Layla, but he doesn't silence himself either, so he'll still benefit from Dragon follow-up, from commander active damage increases and stuff like that, so it's not a huge net loss. And this is a lot of damage, so I list it down here. The highest active scaling I believe you can get is 310% with the Flaming Throne Castle skin and the Strong Assault Dragon skill. The default 4-star commander active damage is 260%. So the damage you're getting from Jon crits alone here, even without Sonara, is about the equivalent damage as 11 active castings of commander damage. Assuming you're monotype, if you're mixed troop types, that will be even lower. The damage increase you're getting there is massive. And similarly with Rhea, her 4-star weapon, she'll create a lot of her own bleeds because you cut down from 20 normals required down to 10. So even without Sonara, you're getting 14 bleeds from Rhea, and that'll be 2,800 additional coefficient. And she'll still be recasting her active off Layla. She can use her active at 1 second off Salma. And this is about the equivalent damage of 9 active castings if you're monotype. When you add these two up, you get an overall increased damage coefficient of 6,200%, which is 20 active castings with the highest active scaling in the game. And the only thing you're losing from that is the loss of Jon's active reprocs because he's male. So he'll be using his active 4 times throughout the fight. A female commander with base Layla's 4-star ability will do it on average 6.36 times per fight, and if that Layla weapon is 4 stars, it will be 8.36 active castings throughout a fight on average, and the net losses of this are listed down here. So I subtract these from the total benefit you're getting from Rhea and Jon. Of course, this maths, as I say here, doesn't include the alternative damage increases you're getting from the female 4-star abilities. So if you have something like Arya here in the place of Jon, her damage will be higher than I list here, obviously, because you're also gaining her death marker effect, but it's a bit harder to math that out, especially because there's so many variables and so many different combinations you can use. But before their 4-star abilities come into play, it's an equivalent damage swing of over 15 active castings with max commander damage scaling. So it's a big leap that the full female lineup is going to have to overcome. I'm making it sound very, very good and realistically just way better than pure female, which I don't think it actually is, as I list down here. So in a vacuum, it won't be better than pure bleed imp or female cav at the very most optimized level. There are various reasons for this, but the biggest one is you're diluting your base attack sources. So Layla can only roll cav, for example, whereas Rhea can only roll imp. So even if you do mono inf or mono cav, you're losing out on base attack stats from how this build is set up, and that is a problem because both of these weapons are somewhat necessary. Rhea is obviously more necessary than Layla, but if you're running 4-star Rhea weapon and Jon, and you don't have Layla weapon, that's just a bit weird, but you could just equip Layla with inf base attack, I guess. And hybriding things like dragon skills isn't as simple because you're only getting half the bleed synergy realistically because there's no extra normal attacks. So you can't use Kevin randomly, for example, because that side of the synergy just isn't present here. It's purely the bleed part, which is only really Rhea and Jon, realistically, that can actually work here. But there are positives to this, and I do think it's something that top-end accounts could at least explore, particularly because of this bit. So it can make use of premium female items if you already have them in your account because you've invested into them. So you can run say, Jon simultaneously with Dany Cersei. If you have 4-star Jon, 4-star Dany, 4-star Cersei, and you bounce between female, you bounce between bleed, this is potentially a way of having the best of both worlds, even if it's not as min-maxed as it could be if you go all the way in either direction. And it enables high-end infantry builds, if you have stuff like Daenerys Cersei with the disarm mechanics, to hard counter other bleed inf builds because you can disarm them with their Sonaras and whatnot. You're getting a ton of damage out of commander damage and things like that, but still getting the benefits of all these crit and bleeds mechanics that you can get from just 2 commanders out of the 5. So overall, I'm not necessarily saying this is going to be a meta-changing build. I do think it's something that players might start exploring at that top end, though, and it serves potentially as quite a natural bridge with Daenerys weapon, I would assume being released in 2 days in Lair of the Flames for bleed inf players to move over and make use of how strong that weapon is if it gets released in its current state at least, and still retain their existing investments and existing sources of, say, infantry base attack and whatnot. Maybe make them a bit less reliant on normal attacks for their damage sources so they aren't countered as hard by others with Daenerys weapon also. And I think we could potentially see this build at least experimented with throughout UC, because the maths on it, as you can see, do end up looking very strong, theoretically at least.